out of South Africa, and the mainstream media, of course, mostly ignoring this story, but we are not. And these words, unsafe and ineffective, those are the words being used to describe Pfizer's mRNA COVID vaccine as part of a new landmark case that is being brought in the High Court of South Africa against Pfizer specifically, demanding that these drugs be stopped immediately, the complete cessation of these drugs. Someone who's been leading the fight to get these drugs stopped immediately is cardiologist Dr. Asim Mayorta, and he joins us now from Gibraltar, Spain, where you're actually speaking on vaccine injuries there in Gibraltar as well. Doctor, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Great to see you again, Clayton.
So what does this case mean? I mean, this is the first of its kind that I'm aware of, and this literally could set the stage for future lawsuits brought against Pfizer around the world.
Yeah, Clayton, so absolutely. So let me just make it very specific and clarify what the case is about. So the Freedom Alliance of South Africa, which is a grassroots movement which has international supporters made up of doctors, lawyers, media, parents, activists, have actually brought a case to the High Court of Pretoria in South Africa, calling for specifically a judicial review of Pfizer's product, stating that the evidence with leading international scientists have contributed with affidavits suggests that the vaccine, Pfizer's COVID vaccine, is not safe and not effective, and want that judicial review to take place. What that means is if it is successful, then it will result in Pfizer's product being removed from the market. And what they've said is that really the medical regulator in South Africa did not do its duty, really, ultimately. The suggestion is that they, approved this vaccine on the basis of irrationality, because the data that was used to make these decisions, and of course, we know this internationally, was based upon Pfizer's own data, which was commercially conflicted. They designed the analysis. We now know the suggestion is there was manipulations of the data from real world evidence. We know that now. Certainly there's a suggestion of that, Clayton, because they told us at the beginning it was 95% effective in preventing infection. That very quickly turned out not to be true. So that's what really is, what this case is about. And I think what's also really important to emphasize is that, of course, there's been a real problem getting this discussion and getting both sides of the story into the mainstream media. That will not be an issue in a court of law. In a court of law, all sides will get an airing. All the evidence will be heard. And I think that's really important because you and I know when you look at the totality of the evidence, it's a very different picture to what we were told at the beginning that this was safe and effective. And certainly my own conclusions, independently even of this case, Clayton, I have been calling for, based upon my peer-reviewed critical analysis and research, for a complete suspension of this product because the evidence suggests that the harms are considerable. And the benefits are certainly now close to negligible. And, I think this is a really important moment that this is happening because it will go to court likely in the next few months. And we'll see how it plays out. And of course, this will be open to the public. It'll be open to the media. It may be televised. So I think it has massive international implications. And you've already alluded to the fact that South Africa itself is a country which has been involved in many historical revolutions for truth and justice. I was there for a few weeks and on a speaking tour, and it hadn't even occurred to me that Mahatma Gandhi started his movement in South Africa. He was actually first jailed in Johannesburg, and I visited the jail where both he and Mandela were first imprisoned. So I think, there's some historical precedent there.
Let's talk about the specifics of what the international body would find in a court proceeding, right? Because we've had investigative journalist Sonia Elijah here on the show multiple times detailing the irregularities in the blot tests and the faking, it looks like, of these of the lab results in order to bring these vaccines to market, like copying and pasting blot test results in order to fake this. So what specifically would this international group of scientists, doctors who are pushing for this review, what evidence do you think they would bring before the judge?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that evidence, actually. It will be subject to, public will be able to see it pretty quickly, actually. But it's hundreds of pages and many, well over a dozen international scientists that have given their own views on what the harms are showing from the vaccine, from anything from, sudden cardiac death, neurological complications, fetal abnormalities. So that's the evidence that they put forward. But just to give you some key points, if you look at the original trial, what's interesting to note is that, when we talk about the benefits of any drug, in a clinical trial, we use a term called efficacy. That in a clinical trial, what were the benefits? And that's efficacy, not effectiveness. Effectiveness actually is what happens in the real world. And there are huge discrepancies between the type of people that were chosen in the trial that led to the approval of the vaccine, Clayton's. For example, traditionally, what the drug companies do is they design the trials, pick the lowest risk group of patients that are likely to get side effects, and then it's then presumed that the benefits and the harms are going to be replicated in the real world, when often it isn't the case, because they have chosen the lowest risk group. But even despite that, and a reanalysis published in the journal Vaccine last year, peer-reviewed journal, highest impact journal for vaccines, revealed that a reanalysis of the original trial in the so-called healthier group that were tested, this vaccine was tested on, still showed more risk of serious adverse events from the vaccine than people being hospitalized with COVID. So from the beginning, it didn't look good. So all these sorts of things are going to be teased out, including there's another interesting issue that many people may not be familiar with, is that the benefits of the vaccine were only deemed to occur after they'd had 2 doses. So if people got COVID in between the first and second dose, that wasn't counted, even though in the trial, there was a suggestion that many people suffered symptoms of COVID having had the first dose, but it wasn't tested for. So all of these things are going to be scrutinized properly in a court of law with various experts. And Pfizer clearly have a case to answer. They will be called, they will be summoned for sure, and they will have to answer the case. And of course, we then have so much data from the real world, from VAERS in the US, yellow card scheme, what's actually happening. And there's a huge disconnect, Clayton, as well. Separate to the case, of course, one of the most interesting publications, which we hadn't discussed on your show, which only came out a couple of months ago, was published in BMC Infectious Diseases. And that was a survey of people in the United States. And what they found, and okay, one can argue it's low quality evidence, but it's still important, because in medicine, we are taught that 80% of your diagnosis comes from the history. That means a discussion with the patient. If you listen to your patient, more often than not, you will get the diagnosis. So you can kind of apply that rule to this sort of publication. And it's quite extraordinary. What they found in this publication is that there may be as many as 1 million serious adverse events that happened in 2021 because of the COVID vaccines in the US, okay? And 278,000 fatalities. Now, this is because they talked to people and they said, do you know of someone that suffered a serious adverse event, or did you suffer one, or someone that may have died, where it was felt, where the patient or the members of the family felt this was caused by the vaccine? Now, this can't be definitive, but it's a huge signal, Clayton, isn't there? There's a big disconnect between what the public now think and what the establishment are telling us, because ultimately the truth is coming out. It's, and it's something that we need to be acting upon. And in my view, separate to the specifics of this case, the evidence is overwhelming. This vaccine should have been suspended and withdrawn or pulled a long time ago. And in fact, one of the things that the case is going to try and highlight is that the system actually is not designed in the way that it should be, in the sense that why are regulators, making decisions on Pfizer's own analysis, not independent researchers looking at it? Because that should have happened from the beginning. And if it did, Clayton, it's likely this vaccine would never have been approved in the first place. So what we need to also think moving forward, hopefully with this case as well, depending on the outcome, is that we need to, dissociate regulators from getting money from industry, right? They're getting money from the very industries they're trying to, approve their drugs on, but also making sure that the analysis and even the design of these trials, drug companies can develop drugs or products, but that should be done by independent researchers. And I think any sensible person, if you speak to them, in a democratic society, would agree with that. And I'm very much somebody that's for real democracy, for informed consent.
Yes, and making sure that we have all the information, not keeping the information hidden. I'll get to a bombshell.